When I presented a paper on the sexual abuse of nuns by priests in Africa in December of 2019, there was significant pushback from many in the audience, but many more in private conversations afterwards. The commonly repeated refrain or explanation was that one, celibacy is not an African value, and second, that sexual trysts that do happen are between two willing adults, that is, an adult priest and an adult nun or woman, thus suggesting that such relationships are consensual. If we are to put an end to sexual abuse of adults, of nuns in Africa and in the African church for that matter, I believe we need to clearly articulate what sexual abuse encompasses and define consent and boundaries in minute details. These two issues constitute the gray area, which creates a lot of wriggle room for offenders and their supporters. Let us remember that in as much as the church condemns abuse of vulnerable adults, her definition as of 2019 of what vulnerable means is very broad, stating that vulnerable includes anyone in an informed state of physical or mental deficiency or deprivation of personal freedom that in fact, even occasionally, limits their capacity to intend or to want to in any way to resist the offense. This definition produced pushback from bishops around the world. And as of now, it only applies to Vatican City State and the Roman Curia, which basically means that for those rare cases of sexual abuse of nuns or adults by priests that do make it to various bishops' attention, the judgment of whether the incident was abuse or otherwise lies within the discretion of the ordinary. And we know what that discretion has translated to in the case of child sexual abuse. It goes without saying that a man forcing himself on a woman is abhorrent. It is easier in such scenarios to correctly judge the incident as abuse and demand for justice for the victim and punishment for the perpetrator. However, we keep seeing that legal courts and the courts of public opinion fail constantly in such scenarios, even when they don't involve clergy and religious, by making excuses for the perpetrator and downplaying the effects on the victim and shaming them. Sexual abuse is nuanced and multifaceted, running the gamut from subtle coercion, grooming, intimidation, the use of privilege and power to garner sexual favors, exploitation of one's vulnerability, inappropriate conversation and touch, jokes, text messages, etc. Sexual abuse is often tied into other forms of abuse, such as verbal, psychological, emotional, spiritual, financial, and identity. The sexual abuse prevalent in our church circles is subtle and manipulative, and thus remains largely unseen, even though some instances of rape have occurred. Let me paint you a picture. Psychology has taught us how people with narcissistic tendencies will belittle and affirm someone in equal measure. Over time, this contradictory behavior tears down the person's self-esteem and results in the targeted individual building an unhealthy bond with the perpetrator, which then makes such a victim easily prone to sexual abuse. That is a relationship that began through psychological and emotional abuse before culminating in sexual abuse. We have also heard of how the office of spiritual direction, of confession, of counseling, and the vulnerabilities revealed therein, in those spaces that are meant to be sacred, are then used to manipulate the victim and open her up to sexual abuse. A case of spiritual abuse leading to sexual abuse. It is also not a secret that many sisters around the world struggle to provide for their basic and essential needs because of financial need. And this has also become an easy loophole for sexual exploitation. Priests will show concern by starting to offer financial and material gifts to a sister or woman rendered vulnerable by her needs, and later on, sexual favors are sought in a distorted form of quid pro quo. Consent and what the law defines as the age when a woman is considered adult are not synonymous. However, that is what is assumed or used as an excuse. That is, she is or she was a grown woman. There are many things that need to be at play for consent to be assumed. Examples include equal power, no form of subtle or overt coercion, both parties needing to be fully informed, amongst others. With the power inherent in the office of the priesthood, whether conferred through the sacrament or inferred through popular culture, the power through patriarchy and clericalism, we would then understand that majority of these so-called consensual relationships are in fact not, but they are actually abuse. Boundaries and professional conduct also need to be clearly stipulated and explained in the definition of sexual and spiritual abuse and inculcated in the formation of priests with clear penalties outlined for violating them. The formation of protocols to address sexual and spiritual abuse of adults in the church need to be prioritized, including cooperation with civil authorities to investigate and prosecute the accused and protect the victims in turn, who are often intimidated and coerced when they speak out. Clericalism has contributed to a very unhealthy version of priesthood, which when it unites with patriarchy and misogyny that is present all over the world, but more so in many parts of the global south, creates a destructive force to not only those under its purview, but also to those who wield it. The victims of this power and the subsequent abuse are not only religious sisters, but women working in parishes and church institutions and outside of it. I have witnessed incidences where homilies were used to mock and chastise women for their dressing and appearance, which is also a form of abuse, both of power, but also of the liturgy. I have also lived in a community where we were denied mass in the convent because we refused to allow the priest to benefit illegally by using church property for his personal benefit. The culture of silence perpetuated by such misplaced popular sayings, such as, it is a sin to criticize a priest, you should only pray for them, or don't air the church's issues to the world because they will scandalize the faithful or destroy their faith, is killing us literally and figuratively. A priest was on trial recently in an African country, accused of hiring mercenaries to kill a former lover and the child born out of their relationship. I am also aware of a case where a private settlement was made when a priest had impregnated a laywoman, and this arrangement had been brokered by the judicial vicar, who is charged with the responsibility of ensuring the rights of the faithful and the duties of the priest. In cases where religious sisters have been impregnated, they are forced to live and fend for themselves on the outside with no help. Whereas many priests, after a suitable sabbatical time, are reassigned and continue on in their ministry, and we can take an educated guess that their abusive tendencies also continue. The buck, however, does not stop or end with priests. It's very tempting to project our criticisms to outside parties, to a common enemy. However, we need to bravely take a long, hard look at our own institutions, structures and policies, and the life we mutually create as religious sisters. Spiritual, psychological, verbal, emotional, mental, financial, physical, sexual, and identity abuse is also prevalent in our own communities. Sister Anne, not her real name, disagrees with her superior when she challenges her on her own inconsistencies in her treatment of the sisters. Instead of seeking mediation to come to a point of common understanding, or the superior accepting the fraternal correction of a fellow sister, Sister Anne is immediately pulled out of school and assigned to a hardship community and what is considered a lowly ministry, that of cooking and cleaning for the other sisters. The local superior is also advised that Anne is a problem case and needs to be humbled. What ensues is years of suffering as her community members shun her, gossip about her, isolate her, in their efforts to distance themselves from her tainted self, or fear of being associated with her who has clearly attracted the wrath of the leaders. Her chances of getting an education are snuffed in the bud. Anne often contemplates leaving. However, her advancing age and lack of education and prospects worry her, as she knows her chances of surviving and thriving on the outside are not that great. Anne sinks into depression, and people often wonder about this sister who always seems sad and a bit unkempt. This story continues to play out in different versions in many of our communities. Why do we still have formation programs that work to strip new members of all personal agency and dignity? Surely there must be ways to transfer the values necessary to religious life without humiliating a person, without breaking their spirit, without keeping them in a state of anxiety and fear. The obsession with controlling and governing every aspect of a sister's life leads to a thriving underground culture, rife with gossip, mistrust, plotting, and underhanded business. As superiors and leaders at all levels of governance, do you recognize your power? And do you choose each day to use this power to ensure that all under your care are flourishing? Why are some sisters unable to access basic health care while others receive the best? And why are education and advantageous ministry placements used as incentives and rewards for the favored ones or those who show fidelity to leadership? Fellow sisters, excuse me, why do we treat sisters from minority groups, other ethnicities, nationalities, or races as less than, denying them an equitable existence in our congregations? Why do we kill with our tongues by maliciously and vindictively gossiping about other sisters due to jealousy or because of personal disagreements? Do we have mechanisms to address sexual abuse within our structures? Are sisters able to find a safe space where their stories will be believed and find a place of healing if they encounter abuse on the outside? Sisters, how come our lay collaborators can recount tale after tale of abuse faced when working under us in our various institutions? And I use the word working under us because many of us choose not to see our lay workers as our sisters and brothers, as partners in ministry. We have created such hostile environments in some of our communities and congregations that our convents have turned into pseudo hotels where we only come to eat and sleep, instead of true communities that model Christ's fraternal love for the world. Our need for companionship and intimacy need to first be met in our own communities. Otherwise, we also contribute in part to pushing our members to seek fulfillment of these intrinsic needs in the wrong places. The desire for intimacy that every human being possesses must be healthily integrated into our lives and talked about openly from formation onwards. Sisters, we need to work extremely hard at unearthing our own internalized patriarchy, misogyny, and biases that have us pulling each other down and treating priests and others better than our own community members, our own sisters. We know of the joke told in many communities that good food is only served when father is joining the community for a meal. I know many congregations struggle financially. However, we need to work collectively to find solutions for the members so that their basic human needs are met and their human rights are respected. Recruiting new members, then keeping them in a state of abject poverty and suffering is not right. Taking in young members who have not fully matured emotionally and psychologically makes them ripe for abuse within and outside the convent. In the same way that you would discourage your 18 or 19-year-old sister from getting married, is the reasoning we should use when recruiting potential candidates to our congregation. I know many congregations prefer young girls to girls with more life experience, claiming that they are easier to form and are unsullied by the world. However, the truth is that they are easier to manipulate and coerce. Informed consent also needs to come into play in vocation promotion, and that comes with maturity. Let us present an honest picture of who we are, our congregations, our limitations and strengths early on, rather than rudely surprising and deeply disappointing candidates down the road when the reality does not come close at all to the image we have painted. Let's talk about Mary, also not her real name, a girl from a poor family who has desired to be a sister from a young age and has been in communication with a congregation throughout high school. After finishing school, the congregation tells her that she can now join them if she's still interested. And as she is debating whether to join, her high school results come out and she has passed exceedingly well with grades that can secure her a place at the university and also an educational grant to pursue the same. However, the vocation promoter convinces her to join with the promise that they'll educate her later. 6 years down the line, she is now a professed sister and has been working in the laundry of their mother house, and she requests to be sent to school. She is then told that getting educated is not a right, but a privilege. Her dejection and her desire to do more than work in the laundry makes her decide to leave. She is let go with only the equivalent of $200 and nothing else to show for those 6 years. Her peers on the outside already finished university and are now working and even helping out their families. Remember what she gave up to join, due to a promise that turned out to be false. Are we being just? Are we acting ethically? This story also continues to play out in our congregations in varying forms. I end today with saying that pain that is not transformed is transferred. The abuse we might have undergone in our childhood or later on in religious life can easily turn us into abusers ourselves. There is precedence and evidence of that in our world and also in religious life. Thus, therapy not only needs to be part of our life, it also needs to be offered to those who choose to leave. However, therapy is not a band-aid. We need to begin by lancing the wound of dysfunctionality, the wound of abuse that we have let flourish in our church, in our institutions, and in religious life. Then we need to collectively refound our common life to be a beacon of light to its members and the world, and to make reparations to the many individuals who bear scars, whose lives have been broken because of what they have undergone at our hands. Thank you.